Hello, and welcome to this episode of Ask the Superintendent. I'm Jay Lang, Superintendent of Schools in Chelmsford, and you're joining me this evening to talk about budget and all things budget in the Chelmsford Public Schools. The spring is town meeting season, and all of our different departments and schools are preparing for the annual budget hearings. So with me this evening, we actually have some guests. Miss Laurie Pellegrino is a parent in the district, and Laurie has served as a moderator for our panels in the past, and she's graciously come back again, so thank you very much for helping out.
Thank you.
Dr. Molly McMahon is the principal of South Row Elementary School, and Mr. Dennis King is the chair of the Chelmsford School Committee. So in this episode this evening, we're going to talk about budget in the Chelmsford Public Schools, what actually goes into it, where we're at in the process, and how you as a resident can become involved. So I know we've had some questions, Laurie, and I'll turn it over to you to start us off.
All righty, thank you. So every year we welcome about 400 new kindergarten families, among others, to our school district. Perhaps we can start with the basic overview for those folks. Are you able to talk to the viewing audience a little bit about the process and timeline for the budget and what goes into developing that and who has input in the budget?
Sure. Maybe I'll start by actually just giving a little bit of a background, and you guys can jump in as you please. Each fall, we actually start developing the budget for the coming school year. So fiscal years typically run July 1st to June 30th, and school years come right along the same way. They run September to June. So we actually started preparing for next July, or the 2020-21 school year, this past fall. We get into budget discussions pretty in earnest, I would say, around Thanksgiving and right through the Christmas holidays. We started in the school department assessing our current staff levels, taking a look at our current programs and services that we're providing in the district, as we want to then make some projections for incoming classes. As you indicated, we'll receive about 400 new kindergarten kids to the district every spring. We actually just had our first week of registration last week in the district, and it was very well subscribed. So I think we're going to get another great group of kindergartners joining us in the fall. The process that's involved, we actually start out with each of our individual schools and departments in the district, talking about their current staffing levels, some of their needs that need to be discussed when we're putting the budget together. And then internally, there's a team at the school department that puts a lot of the numbers in place. What do we know our actuals are going to be for staffing or for services or programs? There are certain costs that are just going to carry over from year to year. You may have a contract that's going to increase by X amount that's a known number. You may be actually negotiating contracts, so you might have to put a kind of a placeholder in the budget for an unknown number. But this all takes place between Thanksgiving and Christmas. Typically at that point of the year as well, the tri-board in town convenes. So that's a meeting between the Board of Selectmen, the school committee, and the FinCom, or the finance committee in the town. And there's a general discussion about the position of the town with regard to anticipated revenue and expenditures for the following year. We try to be on the same page as much as we possibly can so that there's no surprises among any of the boards. Mm-hmm. You don't want the school committee, the Board of Selectmen, or FinCom to be surprised with either revenue projections or expense projections. So I think we've actually done a very good job over the last number of years of maintaining that. And typically I work with the town manager again during that same time period to figure out what the available resources for the schools are going to be. The town manager has been very supportive of the schools. We've had a good relationship over the last number of years, and I think he actually does a very nice job of balancing school department needs against public service needs, whether they be police or fire or libraries, DPW services. He's got a big job, and he's got a lot of people to please, and you can't please everyone all the time. So we're all kind of in the room talking about what our needs and wants are. And try to, again, work with the town manager to come up with a recommended budget projection that the school committee then can consider our staff within the schools can take when we're putting our programs together. Mm-hmm. Typically, those conversations start to begin with the school committee around the end of January. If you watch one of our recent school committee meetings, the last Tuesday in January, I'm sorry.
It was the first one.
It was
February.
the first February.
Yeah.
In meeting in February, I presented the recommended budget for the following year. And again, that took into consideration all of the different wants and requests that had come in from the schools. And at that point in time, I have to give the school committee my best kind of estimate of what it's going to cost to provide the same level, or in this year's budget, we actually made some recommendations for some additional programming. I have to provide that to them. And then at that point, the school committee starts to deliberate on the budget. And they go page by page through the budget and consider, what my recommendations are, if they're grounded. I'm not sure if you want to talk on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, as Superintendent just mentioned, we just saw the budget ourselves for the first time on, I think it was the 4th of February. And so we have a public hearing on the budget on the 25th. So between then, the 4th and 25th, the school committee members will go through the budget themselves and kind of make notes. And, a lot of us will go in and see the superintendent and just discuss some of the items. And then at our meeting on the 25th, we'll go through it line by line and just see if that's what everybody agrees that's the best way to do it. And we'll also have opportunity for the public to come to that meeting and have some input on that. And the budget itself is available online, so other people can also access it and take in some things into account. And if they can't make that public hearing, they can email one of the school committee members, and we'll be sure to make sure that their voice is heard.
Okay, so it sounds like we're in the deliberation phase and
Right.
reviewing public opinion, public input phase for this. Which is great. And then, when it comes to actually approving the budget, what month does that typically fall in, once that section is closed?
So in this next meeting on the 25th, that's when we'll start to go through them page by page, item by item, and make our recommendations, and we'll approve each of those pages individually. And then I believe at the next meeting, we'll approve the whole bottom line.
Yeah, it depends on how much we get through.
Yeah.
So we'll try to get through as much as we can on the 25th. If there are lingering questions or concerns, we obviously posted a meeting on March 3rd.
Yep.
That's the day before my birthday, in case you were wondering.
2 days before my thing.
Oh, I forgot about that. So on my birthday, even two nights from Dennis's birthday, we can convene again, so if we needed to finalize the budget. But what the school committee is actually doing at that point is they're approving each individual page, which is a category of funding, in accordance with the Department of Education regulations. So the total budget amount that's being recommended is $63 million. So that is technically the number that gets moved to town meeting in April. The school committee has latitude during the budget process and really at any point during the school year to reallocate funds within the budget wherever they see fit. So they may come to me with a concern, and if we have extra resources in a particular area, we might make a budget modification or an adjustment mid-year. Ultimately, what they need to do is vote on that bottom line number, that $63 million. This year, that also does align with Town Manager Cohen's recommendation for the schools. It's always nice when that happens, because I feel that's a very fair budget for us, and it's going to continue our momentum forward. It's also a number that the town can afford, because that's been built into the projections. So that $63 million will actually go forward the last Monday in April to town meeting.
Okay.
So the town meeting representatives are technically the body that votes to appropriate money to the school department. So they would vote to appropriate $63 million. The town meeting representatives would not get into individual line item detail, or they wouldn't necessarily make, they may make a suggestion, but they wouldn't make a motion to move money from one line item to another. That's within the purview of the school committee. So ultimately, we're looking for their support on the bottom line, $63 million number. And then the school committee will continue its process throughout the course of the spring. There have been years where we've received extra revenue as the fiscal year is coming to a close. There could be certain special circumstances where you might receive some, it doesn't happen often, but supplemental Chapter 70 aid or additional, say, grant revenue that the school committee can take into consideration at any time. But our two key dates, I think, is that February 25th, when again, it's open to the public. The public is welcome to come and make comments on the whole budget or individual line items. And the committee will go page by page through the budget. Or the next kind of key element for the town to weigh in would be town meeting, which is that last Monday in April. So those are two key dates that are coming forward.
And one of the things we're going to try to do this year that we haven't passed is there's a pre-town meeting, usually the week before, and try to make the budget book available to town meeting reps at that point, that if they go to that pre-town meeting, because they're available at town meeting itself, but for some people, they would like a little bit more time to look it over and in case they have any questions. So we're going to try to do that.
To the town manager, I think it started this some years back where they basically do a smaller group preview of the budget. And it lets residents come out or town meeting reps and really ask some pretty in-depth questions that might be a little more difficult on the floor of town meeting that particular night. I'm going to attend this year as well and try to answer any kind of school-related questions, just to make town meeting actually move as smoothly as we can, just to help with efficiency and making sure that if people do have questions or concerns about the budget, that they have the time to ask them and to raise them. We did email a copy of our budget or a link to the budget to each of the town meeting reps, but we'll actually have a hard copy for them
Right.
as well, so that they can start going through the document that evening.
Okay, great, thank you. So this year, the school budget is just under 50% of the town's entire budget. Will next year be about the same, or will we see an increase? I know you pegged that 63 million.
Right.
Where does that fall normally?
It's going to be similar to that, because we're dealing with such large numbers. So the school department's increase, actually the last 3 years, has been $2 million a year. So we went from 59 million to 61, and then to 63 for this coming year.
Okay.
I think a percent of budget increase, we're right around 3.3% of an increase year over year. The town budget is actually slightly larger as an increase next year. I want to say they're about 4.2 or 4.3%. So they are a little bit higher percentage increase than us. One of the things you do have to look at, not only in Chelmsford but in other cities and towns, there are different portions of the budget. Say, for instance, in Chelmsford, employee benefits are actually budgeted and carried on the town side, even though they affect school department employees. It's just the way that this has been accounted for. So sometimes you will see increases in, say, the town budget go up disproportionately to other individual department budgets. But I think we're getting a very fair, share of the funding going forward for next year. So for us, it's about 3.3% increase, but it's a $2 million increase.
Okay, all right, thank you. So Dennis, you talked a little bit about the school committee process and the role in the budget. Anything else to add there?
No, I mean, the budget is, we're presenting a new budget, but the budget is something we keep an eye on all during the course of the year. We get quarterly reports from the superintendent and the business manager, and kind of keeping us updated where we are on the various line items, and if anything's over, anything's under budget, how we're doing on the grant reserves and those type of things. So we're always trying to keep an eye there, and if anything needs adjustments, we can make adjustments that we have in the past. If there's any needs, something comes up, like I know the copiers was something that came up out of that we were going to have to do something with, and found out that it was a good idea to purchase our own, and that's something that we could take care of now, and so that's going to actually cut down on that particular line item next year, because we're able to do that this year in this year's budget. So it's definitely a working document. It's not, we don't just sit there and it stays there. We're always keeping an eye on it, and
It's kind of a spending blueprint for the year,
Yeah.
but it can change, and it does change
Yep.
based on your needs and what comes
Right.
up. But I think the school committee does receive regular reports, but I think they also ask timely and appropriate questions to make sure that the money that we are spending is being spent properly and it's being accounted for properly. So I think it's been a very good exchange, but it's nice to know that you can make adjustments based on your needs at that given time.
Right. And all those documents are available to the public as well.
Yeah, they're all online. If anyone is interested in, if they haven't received a copy of our budget, there's a link right on our main district website to the fiscal 21 superintendent's recommended budget, so they can go and download it. It's a very transparent document with regard to it. It lists all of our different program expenditures. I provide a nice narrative that actually just talks about Chelmsford spending compared to other comparable community spending. We also take a look at Chelmsford performance to other comparable communities' performance to let the community know, they're getting a very good bang for the buck when it comes to education spending. And then we actually do break through all of the, break down all of the Department of Ed spending categories is how we organize our budget. There's a complete staff listing so that someone can actually see programmatically year after year how we are enrolling students, but how they actually transition from kindergarten to first to second. We have a lot of different bubble classes within the district if we have higher enrollments than average, and that's all mapped out in the document.
Excellent. So if a parent has a question, they want to, provide some input, we have the February 25th meeting. Other ways to contact folks for input?
They can email any school committee member, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can, and we'll present any questions you might have. We can present them ourselves at the budget hearing. So if they can't make the meeting, we're hopefully a good resource for everybody.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. And again, email addresses available
Yep.
on the website,
Yep,
right?
correct.
Everything's online, so if you do go to the website, my address is there and all like the central office contacts, even in the business office.
Yeah.
The school committee websites are all there. And I will say, feel free to email anyone, school committee members, central administration. And again, if you can't make the budget hearing, even if you had a statement that you wanted to have read, the
Right.
school committee members will read your statement and actually enter it into the record so that we can have that dialogue that evening when it comes up for budget.
All right, excellent, thank you. So, moving along on the budget. In reviewing recommendations for new positions in the coming year, I know that there's been more emphasis on special education, student support services, and technology. Can you speak to this?
Yeah, let me actually start, and then I'll ask a couple questions of some of our panelists here this evening. But when we were putting our base budget together, we were able to carry all of our carrying costs year over year in the budget. So that's what we consider our base. So our base is rolling forward or moving forward. We're not looking at any reductions in programs and services for next year. And we actually were able to free up some funding within the budget to be able to add some programming. So one of the things that we've looked at is, say, on the technology front. As you know, last year we implemented a one-on-one computer initiative, Chromebook laptop initiative at 2 grade levels. So all of our incoming 5th and 9th grade students received a district-issued Chromebook. All of our staff did as well at those grade levels. So the thought process is to utilize some school choice funding so that we're able to implement that whole initiative without really taxing the taxpayers in any way. This is year 2 now, so our current 5th graders will be moving on to 6th and keeping their device, same with our 9th to 10th graders, and we're now going to backfill. So our incoming 5th and 9th will get it as well. So we're actually going to have 50% of the district of 4 grade levels next year that are going to have Chromebooks, or over 1,500 students. So as we're adding that additional kind of burden to the system when it comes to support, we have to provide some additional supports for our students and our staff so that they feel comfortable with the devices. The last thing we want to do is give out devices and then not be able to properly support them. So at the high school level, we currently have 1 technology integration specialist. So the budget calls for actually adding a second. So that's a position that actually is very hands-on, working almost as kind of a coach and providing professional development training, mostly to staff. They can go into classrooms and staff are doing lessons and actually help them with technology, get to learn the new tools, the new apps. It's a welcomed resource. At our 2 middle schools, we have full-time TIS in those buildings, but they're also doing teaching classes and students. So one of the things we recommended was adding a technology assistant in those 2 middle schools, which will then free up our 2 TISs to be able to actually be in the buildings more. Again, coaching and working with those 5th and 6th grade teachers who are now going to have devices, and also being able to support the students in those grade levels. So that was an initiative to really provide additional support. Our staff also asked for support in professional development and training, and we're kind of freeing up some of those resources to do that. On the special ed front, we have been taking a look at our class sizes again, particularly at the elementary school level. We have a large number of students, a larger than average number of students, actually coming up from CHIPS, our integrated preschool next year, into our kindergartens in the schools. So when we're taking a look at the IEPs and the specific services that are delineated in them, we needed to provide some additional staff to meet those needs. We're also obviously looking at providing exceptional services at that level, and we want to keep our class size ratios really as small as we can for those staff to student special education students. So one of the recommendations was to add 3 additional elementary level special ed teachers, Harrington, Center, and Byam. So that's been included in the budget for next year. This actually, I'm going to ask Molly to speak on. About 2 years ago, we were very successful in adding what we call a district strive program. So this was an elementary level program. We'd identified a need, and we didn't have appropriate services really for some of our most needy students when it came to different behavioral or therapeutic type needs. And we actually started out a therapeutic program at the elementary school. it was housed at South Row, and we now have some students in that program that are ready to move up to middle school. So the request is to actually add a complementary middle school program at McCarthy. McCarthy is going to be the middle school to house that program. But I thought maybe actually Molly could talk a little bit about how Strive kind of came about to be at South Row, what some of the different resources that it took to really get it off the ground. It's doing phenomenal, and I want to thank you and your staff for really developing that program. But give us a sense of what it might look like as it now moves up to middle school.
Sure. I think the program is such a success because of the timing. Similar to what we're doing now is when we decided to start this program 2 years ago, we really started these conversations with committee work. And we were able to secure the positions that we wanted in the budget early enough that we could hire the best possible staff. And I will say we've hired some fantastic staff which have made the program such a success. And what's important about that is, again, the support of the district and the school committee in realizing what kind of staffs are needed. And so we also had the benefit of being able to do a lot of professional development over the summer. So we all were able to meet as a team, and I'll get into who is part of that team, to really develop common language, entry-exit criteria, everything that we would need to be successful when September came and students were coming. So we had really felt like it was important to have the right amount of teaching staff, and again, specifically special education teachers that not only can teach the academics, but also understand behavior and social emotional needs. So we were able to hire 2 teachers for K through 4. So again, one teacher is K1-2, one is 3 and 4, and that can flex as the years. If for some reason we have more students in one grade level, we can certainly flex that model. But some of our social emotional students still do have academic IEP goals, so they do still need some pull-out services. They may need a day or a time period where they're actually sub-separate. We've been very successful where we really haven't needed that yet, but we have the potential, which is what's important about having enough teachers to be able to do that. In addition, a key component that we found was to really make sure that we had a board-certified behavior analyst, or a BCBA. They specialize in behavior programming. They can do something called an FBA, so a functional behavioral assessment, where they can really determine what is the function of the behavior so that they can best meet the needs of that student. They can program the student, they can train staff, both in de-escalation techniques as well as social emotional needs, et cetera. Ours has been incredible in the programming. And then on top of that, we also want to provide not just behavior support, but it's really important that there's also social emotional supports. At the elementary level, we have a full-time guidance counselor and a full-time psychologist. And it being a smaller building, we were able to have our guidance and psychologists help absorb those therapeutic services. But again, with the middle school being double the size, I know one of the other recommendations for the middle school program is to have an additional psychologist between the 2 middle schools so that there's a lot more support for Strive at McCarthy. Again, as Dr. Lang mentioned, we do have students transitioning at this point from the program at South Row. And I think like any special education program, academic, behavior, social emotional, et cetera, you want to have a continuum of support. So we're looking to provide support to McCarthy ourselves at South Row, our team, in terms of that continuum of service. And we want to just make sure that our students are provided with the same service. Although we found all of our students to make great growth, they still have that social emotional disability and they still have those needs. And again, middle school can be even more challenging with changing classrooms, their age group, et cetera. So we just want to make sure that we have that complete continuum of support. So we're really looking forward to this recommendation in the budget. I know it sounds funny being the elementary person talking about this, but I think we've been so invested in these students and we really want to see the continued success of them. And McCarthy does a wonderful job, but we also want to just continue to provide the same level of service. So we're very excited about this proposal of these positions. I think it'll be really important for our students.
Just to jump in for 1 second, Dr. McMahon had mentioned the psychologist support. So one of the reasons I think the program is very successful is because of the additional supports that we have. And we talked as a school committee about this too at the time when we even recommended the elementary program, that we didn't want to do it if we weren't going to do it properly.
Right.
And it had to be staffed properly to really make it worthwhile. And I think we did do that at South Row. And we want to do the same at McCarthy for this program. When you look at our psychologist level supports now at the elementary level, we have a full-time psychologist, and this has taken us some years to get to, but we have a full-time dedicated psychologist in each of our elementary schools, serving a population between 450 and 500 students, who then move up right now to the middle schools, and we have a full-time psychologist in each building, but you have about 750 to maybe 800 students per building, potentially. So that's a far less ratio than we would want. And at the high school level, we actually did add a psychologist 2 years back. So they have a house model now. So they actually have a psychologist to about every 500 students at the high school. So we knew the middle school level, didn't really have the psychologist ratio that we would like. We have augmented that a little bit over the last year or two with some contracted services, and we've had some psychologists come in to help with some evaluations. And they're phenomenal, but it's not quite the same as actually having a person in the building who can also make those, not only do the assessment piece, but make that contact with the kids to be able to host some of the groups and keep that moving. So by hiring another psychologist that'll actually split between McCarthy and Parker, we'll be able to pick up some of that caseload that we were actually contracting out, and also be able to have this individual really support that STRIVE program. So I think that's going to be very beneficial.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, thank you for covering the other elementary schools too, and
Right.
both Parker and McCarthy. So
Right.
that's great. Thank you.
I think it's important to note too, we have a $2 million increase, which sounds like a big number, it is a big number, and we do thank the town manager and the selectmen board and the town meeting reps for investing in the schools. But a lot of those costs are fixed costs. I mean, a lot of that increase is going to salaries and supplies and utilities. So the superintendent and staff have been able to add in these programs, within that framework, with good financial practices and being able to use the money wisely so that we are able to afford these things without, overtaxing the people of Chelmsford. So.
All right, excellent. So can you comment on the pay adjustment for substitute teachers and nurses?
Sure. So that was one of the, in addition to some of those other bigger changes we're making to our full-time staff. One of the things we did note recently is that our sub rates were on the bottom end of our comparable or neighboring districts. So in order to be competitive and actually be able to increase our fill rates, so we have fill rates for teachers and we have fill rates for paraprofessionals, we're not at 100% right now. So there are days when we don't have a substitute, say, for a paraprofessional, and or a teacher, and then the paraprofessional kind of steps into that role for the day, which again isn't optimal. And when we looked at our rate currently at $75 per day, it's really on the lower end. So in the budget book at the very tail end, in one of the appendices, there is a report from our personnel office that just indicates where we are in comparison to our neighboring communities, and recommends an adjustment to go from the $75 up to $90 per day, which will actually put us on the top of our comps, the top of our comparable districts and neighbors. So we're actually hoping that that is going to have Chelmsford be an attracting site for substitutes to help with some of our fill rates. Similarly on nurses, we also have been having some difficulty attracting day-to-day nurse subs because, again, we're in a very good kind of medical environment. If a nurse wanted to go and be a per diem type staff member, they can actually get a much higher rate if they go to a local hospital, or even higher if they wanted to go to Boston for a day. So we are increasing our sub rate, or recommending moving from 130 to 150 to be a little bit more in line with some of our neighboring districts. And again, it's trying to just make Chelmsford a desirable place to come and work. That also takes the burden off our full-time regular staff if they know that the fill rates are a little bit higher and they're not going to be asked to, say, fill in for an extra class if we're short a sub here or there. So that's, kind of some of that quality of life almost issue that we're trying to help our regular staff with. But we also want to be an attractive landing spot for subs in our district. I'd much rather have them and high-quality subs come to us than to some of our neighboring towns.
All right, thank you. So moving forward, next step, budget process. I know we talked a little bit about the review, February 25th input, and then folks can reach out to anyone for comments or questions, right? Anyone on the school committee or?
Yes, I mean, your big date coming up next is Tuesday, February 25th. That'll be the first night, full-blown budget hearing from the school committee. Open participation, people can come and ask questions, certainly are encouraged to do so. If they can't make that, they can email school committee members, they can email central admin, and we'll make sure that their concerns come up that evening. Beyond that, I would say there will be a school committee recommended budget that gets posted online, and that's the budget that'll go to town meeting the last Monday in April. So those are two critical dates that are coming forward in the coming months.
And that'll be 6 o'clock, is when we usually
6
start.
o'clock on the 25th.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, well, Laurie, can I take this opportunity to thank you again for helping moderate the discussion this evening? It was great to talk a little bit about budget and some of the work that's going to be happening in the Chelmsford Public Schools over the next couple of weeks. The spring and budget season is always a fun time for us, so we look forward to it. And thank you very much for watching this episode of Ask the Superintendent on the Budget. Have a good night.